You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. This may be our most somber or most fiery episode in the short history of this podcast because it's official. The streak is over. The Washington football team defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers 23-17, snapping the Steelers' 11-game winning streak and leaving their record at 11 wins and 1 loss. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward, Guthrie Rasmussen, and for the first time, we are joined by Luke Sawhook. He writes fantasy football articles for the Renegade Blitz and numerous other publications. Just talk about some of those ventures and how you joined the Renegade Blitz.
Thanks, Ty. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's really nice to be here. But yeah, so I started off with Renegade Blitz, but I just hit him up on the Twitter one day, actually. But yeah, I hit up Renegade Blitz. I've been following the page for a really long time. I'm a huge Steelers fan, so I just DM'd him, and I had some experience doing social media stuff. And I was like, hey, if you guys ever want some social media stuff or any articles written, just like hit me up. Then we talked for a little bit, and then now I'm doing a weekly Steelers Fantasy Outlook article for Renegade Blitz. So be on the lookout for that every week. But yeah, I started off doing stuff with Dynasty Nerds mainly, and then worked my way through some other things, and then here we are.
It's awesome. Welcome to the team. And if you want to join the team as well, all you have to do is just DM us on Twitter. We're always looking for writers. We're always looking for more content. And who knows, maybe you can be on the podcast as well. We've got a lot to unpack today. This is uncharted territory for us. This is the first losing recap. It's usually a victory Monday, a victory Tuesday, a victory Thursday, a victory Friday if it would have been for the Thanksgiving game. It's just everything is new. But with everything going on right now, it's going to allow us to approach this podcast in a new perspective. It allows us to, just like the Steelers hopefully will, change some things around. So let's start with a little game. In one word, what was the biggest contributor to the Steelers' first loss of the season? We'll start with our first guest, our special guest, hopefully future contributor, Luke Sawhook.
I'll go with finishing.
Elaborate on finishing.
Finishing as in 4th and goal, 3rd and inches, 4th and inches. We couldn't finish it. The running game was so lackluster in short-yarded situations and short-yarded situations for the offense in general. I just think finishing was what killed us. And
Chris, you wanted to get in with your answer, so
I was going to go simply put drops. My unofficial count, the last 2 games have been 16 drops by the receivers, and it's just mind-boggling because I was mentioning before we got on here, it's just like a couple of weeks ago we were saying like, could this be the best receiving group that Roethlisberger's ever played with, or at least the most, the deepest group, having the most depth? And man, the last 2 games they've been really disappointing, especially Ebron and Deontay Johnson. I saw a stat today that said Johnson leads the league in drops with 9. It's just he's a great receiver and everything. He runs really great routes. He just has to fix up on the dropping issues.
Yeah, we're certainly eating our words. I had great words for Ebron in our recap through 10 games podcast with Chris Carter, and he agreed with it. And I'm curious. I might send him a message on Twitter. It's like, you still want to double down on that? Because I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not getting paid for anything. Why not? But Guthrie, what is your one word, and then elaborate the biggest contributor to a Steelers loss?
This is kind of a little weird, but I'm going to go with Randy just because of the play calling. I haven't been on this train where I've, hated on him a lot. And I don't know if it's all on him per se. So a lot of these early down play calling and late down play calling, like you had 8 tries to score, like on the one, and it's nothing happened. It's just, you got to take a look in the mirror at some point.
Luke, you wanted to add in on that?
Yeah, just to bounce off the Randy thing, I think some of the play calls that were the most questionable of the last couple of weeks, he's done it twice now where they come out in a heavy formation and then they spread it out and go 5 wide and then throw it to the running back in critical situations. I just don't understand that. I understand a bit of the trickery of coming out in heavy, but then why do you go 5 wide? If you're going to come out in heavy, go out in heavy and run the ball. I understand trying to get a little cute and try to do something fancy, but I'm not with it. If you're gonna run the ball, run the ball. If you're gonna pass the ball, put Ebron and Samuels and stuff out there. Don't have Benny Snell catching passes on fourth down.
Well, my one word is trenches, and often underlooked issue that I think is really the biggest symptom for the Steelers is the offensive line. And I really believe that has been kind of the driving force towards a lot of the sometimes questionable play calling coming from Randy Fichtner. The line really doesn't get much jump on these running plays, these obvious running situations like a 4th and goal. We've been really calling the Twitter handle and the website as a whole looking for Derek Watt, but even on that Benny Snell play, Derek Watt didn't exactly do his job well. He got caught up a little bit out there. So it's a lot of things right now. So the game is won in the trenches, and defensively, at least, the Steelers are going to win that with that incredible front seven. But right now on the offensive line, there's a ton of questions, and draft, free agency, hopefully in the future answers those questions.
Yeah, this offensive line could very much be very different in the next couple of years, and you have to wonder if that's something that we need, because right now they've definitely taken, from what it seems, like a step back. I mean, this, if you look through it through like a very narrow lens, just the run, is it on the running backs or is it on the line? I mean, you could look at it through both ways. Just having Ben throw, I believe we'll get into it, but him throwing 53 times. I mean, that shouldn't happen, especially at his age. That's kind of what Joe Burrow's been throwing all year before he got hurt. And it's, that's just not the Steelers standard. I'm excited to get more into it with you guys.
Let's start with getting into maybe the most common subject that we've gotten into, aside from the running game, in any of our recaps, and that's the slow starts. It's really a microcosm of everything the Steelers have done this year. At certain points, the Steelers just couldn't move. I mean, it took 4 drives to get into the end zone for the Steelers. Now, Washington's defense is great and all that stuff, but especially with the weapons, with the opportunities of motion that's been non-existent, by the way, from the Steelers offense, I don't know what goes on with play calling. Like, who's the captain of the ship really here? And of course, those first 3 drives, they didn't register over 2.5 minutes of possession time for the Steelers. It felt like Washington was willing to allow the Steelers to go underneath all game, really, for their plays and just meet them at the point of the attack well before the first down marker. Then, on one possession, they finally went down the field, but they failed from 4th and goal. A crucial 6 points that, honestly, with everything that goes on, nobody's really looking at that. That's one thing that I believe was a difference in terms of a Steelers win versus a Steelers loss, because that's potentially up 14. What did you think about the latest in slow starts for the Steelers, and how can they fix this problem before a loss equals elimination?
Well, what I think we just need to get some more explosive plays going. I mean, obviously Ben and Claypool haven't really been connecting on the deep ball very much, but you didn't see a lot of Ray McCloud this game, which I think was interesting. Usually in games, you see some Ray McCloud end arounds or some dump offs. I think he had like one screen pass that went nowhere, but we need to be a little bit more inventive with getting some chunk plays, some chunk yardage. Like you said it, Ty, but they kept going underneath. And Washington's corners were so physical, they were meeting them as soon as they caught the ball, allowing like a 1 or 2 yard gain every time. That's not going to get you down the field and score you points. You need to connect with some big chunk plays. You also need to establish the run so that way you can run some play actions and then hit deep down the field. If you just keep going dink and dunk down the field, you're not going to hit on these big plays and score some points.
Chris, we mentioned in the interview with Bram Weinstein, Bram actually mentioned that if they get time, you can carve up this Washington defense. And sometimes Ben had the time, but other times play calling just never gave him that time. This guy hasn't been sacked in 3 games. I think it's time to let loose on the offensive line and at least say, Ben, you can protect yourself. It's Ben. We know he's going to be fine, hopefully.
I agree with what you guys said. Like the dink and dunk stuff is this. I think teams are starting to pick up on that, and Washington really, defended that well. Roethlisberger, I think he has to start taking some more deep shots downfield. Claypool really wasn't utilized as what he should have been. Really, he only had like 2 receptions. About the slow starts, I looked it up yesterday that they only have had one touchdown scoring drive on opening possession this year, and that was against Tennessee in Week 7. And before that, you have to go all the way back to 2018 because they didn't have any last year. Opening touchdown drive, it was against the Patriots in Week 15 of 2018. So I think that. What do you guys think about that? I think that's probably like Fichtner because like he's the one that's scripting it up to start the game.
We'll go with Luke, and then we'll go to Guthrie.
Yeah, just real quick, I just heard you say the thing about Claypool being limited. I think it's because he had Fuller on him like the entire game. I noticed that Fuller was shadowing him a lot, and Fuller is an elite cornerback. I mean, if you look at PFF, he's one of the highest graded corners in the NFL. So it makes sense he got shut out. But I think we need to scheme differently. I think if you notice, if teams start to take away Claypool, they're going to need another guy to step up and be the big play threat, like an Eric Ebron or Ray McLeod. Juju and Deontay Johnson, as good as wide receivers as they are, they're not going to be those big explosive play guys. So if you take Claypool out of the equation, you need somebody else to step up.
Yeah, I completely agree. You just have to keep defenses honest. If this is all you're doing, this bend, just getting the ball out quick, it's like what we saw. Like defenders are just going to know, put their arms up and, just are able to time that out. It's so predictable. And that's really the problem right now is just the predictability of everything. And I think everybody said everything. I think you guys made some great points. Just figure out ways to keep defenses honest. And part of that is, and I believe what it comes down to, is just having a run game.
Yeah, Sweat had 3 pass deflections at the line of scrimmage, and the last one was crucial. That play of the game really. Of all players, John Vostik picked off them to pretty much close out the game for Washington.
Brand's literally in the interview saying still a coverage liability, and it's like, granted, it was a high deflection. Someone's going to catch that ball, and it's probably going to be a defender, not an offensive lineman, but still, Vostik was everywhere. I think he led the entire game in tackles, didn't he, Chris?
I'll have to look back, but he did have a good game just from watching, rewatching the game. He was all over the field pretty much, making tackles and everything. He got beat by McFarland. And we'll probably talk about this later on that 4th and 1 play, but he got laid out to coverage and everything. And that's another issue that we'll get down.
No, yeah, actually, we can go ahead and talk about that McFarland issue right now. McFarland's known as a guy that's not really a pass-catching back, and he's not supposed to be going inside the tackles. And somehow, he led the team in rushing with 14 yards. The team only had 21.
Yeah, he had the longest run of the game with a 9-yard run. But I can't believe that they said he was the number one option on that play out of like all the talent they have, the receivers they have. It was like a weird formation too. I think they had like a heavy set and like McFarland was out wide and you only needed 1 yard and they were relying on like a double move from McFarland to, kind of throw a deep pass. And, Ben, the ball was behind McFarland and, he could have made the grab, but it would have been a tough catch. It was just a weird situation there. I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I think it was from shotgun tight.
Yeah, it was just a weird play. He only had 5 receptions on the year, and in that moment, I don't think they should have done that.
It seemed like a mesh thing. I haven't played Madden in forever, but Luke, I know you know this. There's one route and there's one play in which the running back runs a wheel route, and usually, if you time that ball correctly, he's going to get it 90% of the time. I know you probably know that play.
Yeah, I definitely do. It's hitting off of what somebody said. I think it was Chris. They came out in such a weird formation where they had a heavier set out on the field, and then all of a sudden you're throwing to the running back as your best option when Claypool's sitting on the sideline. Your best wide receivers are sitting on the sideline watching. I just don't get it. Like, if you're going to run the ball, put your best running back on the field and let him get the ball. If you're going to pass the ball, throw it to your best weapon. I don't understand why we're going away from the philosophy of get your best players the ball in their hands. Trust your best players to make the game-winning play. I just don't get it why we're not doing that. It's so weird to me.
It's like what Luke said. Just, keep it simple. It just blows my mind how, it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. We just can't get a yard with our running backs. It just blows my mind. It kind of sucks. Or just do a QB sneak. It's like, is it because of our offensive line or something? Protecting Ben, of course, I understand that's the utmost importance. But when it comes down to it, you're going to have to be able to take those risks and try to get that yard to get that first down or get that touchdown, because that's going to be the difference between winning games and losing games, and that's what we saw yesterday.
Here's the question, really: who's that go-to running back? Is it James Conner? Is it Benny Snell? Can it be McFarland? Can it even be Jalen Samuels, who had a couple nice plays in the receiving game? There's no go-to guy that says, hey, look, I need a yard. And I don't know if Ben doesn't want to run QB sneaks, if they just figured that not even for tape purposes, to at least have something out there. Have Derek Watt, you're paying him $2.5, $3 million, something like that, to be a fullback. Those are short yardage situations that I remember a Kreider or someone like that make that run. What's up? Is this the best we're going to see from this running game all year?
I don't know. I really just think it's just a lack of a big-bodied running back. I mean, Benny Snell is a big-bodied running back, but is he really? I mean, he's a small guy who runs like a bruising running back, but it's just a problem. I mean, I think James Conner is such a weird type of running back. Don't get me wrong. I like James Conner, but he's too small to be a power back, and he's too big to be an elusive back. So he's kind of this weird hybrid combo back who does a little bit of everything, but he doesn't do one thing amazingly well. So I think it really would benefit the Steelers to get a guy who can go get a yard, but who knows with this team, man? I don't know who's the guy. I mean, if you're Mike Tomlin or Randy Fichtner, who are you giving the ball to? I mean, if it were me, I would just give it to Connor, I guess, because I'm paying him the most. Well, am I even paying him the most? I don't know, but he's the guy for the team. But that's who I'd probably give the ball to, but I'm not even sure there's a clear answer. It's tough.
I was going to say, I think they're really missing Pouncey there at center. Hassenauer, did okay, but he's not obviously what Pouncey is. I think they had him in there. They could have run the ball up in the middle when they had that goal line debacle where they had the ball on the 1 yard line for 5 straight plays and 3 runs by Benny Snell Jr. He had no gain on all the runs. It's just crazy situation down there. And then you throw the ball to Hawkins, who just came off the COVID-19 reserve list on a pass play, tackle eligible. That's a questionable call also there by Fichtner. As far as the run game goes, Fichtner, I don't think he trusts this offensive line to get that 1 yard, especially after what happened on the goal line. And it's really becoming evident that this offensive line is just, they're great at pass blocking, but they can't run block, really.
Guthrie, do you have anything?
It's like what we just been saying. It's like, is that the best you have? Is that the best option, like that play to Hawkins? And I'm sure that's what you were about to say too, Lucas. Like, is that our best option, right, at that moment? Passing it to, it's not even Zach Banner. I mean, come on. It's Joe Hawkins.
That's what I was going to say, actually. I was going to say, did you guys see Zach Banner's tweet? He was like, I'm going to talk to Fichtner about that.
Yeah, exactly. I know we all wanted to talk to Fichtner about that. It's just, you remember that play earlier in the year where you that end around to Claypool? It's like that's who I'd trust to get a yard there. It's like you got to be creative, but there's a line too. And I think that, trying to pass it to the offensive lineman with all the talent you have around you, why can't we trust it to Ebron, Claypool, Juju? I don't know. It's obviously way more complicated than that.
One last thing I had to add, actually, just real quick, is I've noticed watching the Steelers and watching various other NFL teams is I feel like our running back style of hitting the hole is so different than other teams. Like, for example, I was watching Seattle the other day. That game that Carlos Hyde had a nice game a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Their running backs hit the hole immediately. I feel like Le'Veon Bell almost has like a lingering effect over the Steelers running back to kind of wait and watch, but that's not their skill set. I feel like the running backs would benefit so much from just running quicker to the hole, but I don't know.
You mentioned you can't pinpoint exactly what James Conner can do well as a running back. He's kind of that hybrid. I could tell you one thing he is. If you give him a fullback and you line him up in the eye, broken eye, whether strong or weak, if you give him a lead blocker, he pulls off something like he did to end the game against Denver. He runs off for 70 yards, and if it wasn't for just wanting to waste the clock, that's a touchdown.
I totally agree with you. I think that's a thing that's been a bit of a lost art for the Steelers recently is coming out in a heavier set on early downs instead of coming out in empty sets and just pound the ball for a little bit, I mean, I feel like the Steelers have been missing a bit of their identity there.
Now it's time to get into the passing game, but before we talk about Ben Roethlisberger's good day relative to what happened out on the field, I want to get your thoughts on this. So I have a couple tweets that are from Chris Muller of 93.7 The Fan. Games 1 through 5 are the Giants to the Browns games. Their passing, they were 166 attempts, 1,106 yards, and a 109.1 passer rating. Games 6 through 11, Tennessee through last night, 269 attempts, 1,616 yards, a 92.3 passer rating. running game. Through the first 6 games, 159 rushing attempts, 684 yards, averaging 4.3 yards a carry. Game 6 through 11, 126 rushing attempts, 406 yards, the worst in the NFL, 3.2 yards per average. And let me remind you, this rushing attack has fell. Those first couple games, that first set, 1 through 5, they had 100 yards rushing by at least one rusher, be it Benny Snell or James Conner. Do you feel that they've just decided, let's hitch our wagons to Ben? Because I'm saying this game 6 is where Ben was kind of feeling himself a little bit. And he kind of went away from what was the game plan to begin the year, which is, maybe he'll throw it like around the number of NFL teams, maybe a little bit more, 35 or so. Guys, what's your thoughts on that? We'll start with Guthrie.
I think the Ben's at his best when he has that lead back. He is that game manager, though, who can carve you up. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he isn't, but just having that, 100-yard game from Connor, from Snell, just look at the results of the games that we win. I mean, that's usually the stat line. We've had a couple where we've gotten lucky where it's not like that. But we need that lead back, and that's might be where we fall short this year, is this not having that lead back, and it's really getting shown after with Connor, unfortunately, on the COVID-19 list. Hopefully he's back this week, and if he comes back, it's like we're definitely going to need him to produce, because I just feel like we're much better when we have that lead back that helps Ben out.
Yeah, I think the run pass ratio right now is just not balanced. Ben's thrown the ball way too much. I mean, over 50, he had 51 pass attempts against the Ravens, and they had 53 against Washington yesterday. So I mean, that's just way too many passes for Ben. I think Fiedner's just got too pass happy with everything. About the running back, I said this a couple podcasts ago, or maybe it was a month ago or whatever, but I think they might have to draft a running back again. I don't know if Benny Snell Jr. or Anthony McFarland Jr. or James Conner are really the answer. And also look for the Steelers to draft a tight end also, because Ebron, has been having issues catching the ball, and both him and McDonald struggled blocking yesterday against Washington. They do have a good defensive line, but still, I mean, I'll look for tight end in the draft also.
I completely agree with that. And just something I have to add, it's just getting that reliability from, one of those guys just to get that first down or catch the ball. It's just going to be huge, because a lot of these attempts, you subtract the drops, Ben would be having a much better day. And, do you think also has to be due to the fact that Ben takes a lot of those veteran days off? He just misses connection, time with his receivers during the week. That could be it too, especially during these short weeks, just not having a lot of time to practice. And, like during these short weeks, you guarantee that they're giving Ben the rest, of course, because he's throwing 50 times in a game before the practices. It's just, I think there's a lot of moving parts here, but, I just think that, we need some help. And looking in the bigger picture, yeah, I completely agree. We need to look into the draft and take a look in the mirror and just decide who you want to be, especially in this next few years where, this division is going to be very different. This year really is our window.
Luke, anything?
For the running game, I feel like it's a combination of things. I think that the running backs as a whole have been kind of they're not in a rhythm at all. The rhythm is non-existent. Taking away Pouncey has also been terrible. Washington's front seven is also excellent. But regardless of that, I think the running game has been abysmal in general. I agree with the other guys. I think we should definitely draft a running back. I don't know if first round, but maybe second or third. You can definitely find capable running backs there. I mean, look at Antonio Gibson, who actually I'm a big fan of. He got injured yesterday, but he was a third-round draft pick this year. I mean, there's always a guy who comes out of like the third, fourth round who ends up being very good for the NFL. I mean, look at James Robinson. He was undrafted. So there's definitely places you can find a new running back for the Steelers. I just think that we need to go in another direction maybe. I mean, something's got to give, I mean, Tomlin said, I think after the Jacksonville game that they were going to vow to fix the running game or something like that, but they haven't done it yet. I don't know what needs to give. Maybe it's the loss of Mike Munchak, the offensive line coach, who's obviously fantastic. Something is different and something is wrong, and they need to do something to fix it. The question is it was fine earlier in the season, so what broke halfway through?
Chris, you also had your hand up for something?
Yeah, I want to ask Luke, what are your thoughts on tight end in this upcoming draft?
Well, actually, I was talking to Ty a little bit about it earlier. I think the draft class for tight ends this year is fantastic. I just don't know if the Steelers pull a trigger on a tight end unless a guy like Kyle Pitts or some other fantastic prospect falls into their lap in the first round. I think that Ebron's contract is very affordable. It's 2 years, $12 million. It's only $6 million a year. I mean, you look at Chicago. I mean, they paid Jimmy Grandpa way more money. I mean, I think Ebron's contract is very not valuable, fairly priced for an NFL team. So I don't know if they'll draft one this year, but maybe next year. We'll see. I think if anything, they would draft a blocking guy later on. I think Ebron's a good receiving tight end. I just think they might need a better blocker.
Yeah, they definitely need a better blocker. Ebron's never been known to be, the best blocker. And, he was doing well, as far as receiving the ball. This last 2 games, he's had a real struggle, catching the ball. And did you guys see on that goal line play where he was coming in motion? He looked like he was too far out, and Chase Young just came in screaming down the left side and tackled Benny Snell Jr. in the backfield and got stopped on 4th and goal there. And that was just mind-boggling play there. I don't know why Ebron lined up so far outside, especially going up against Chase Young. I don't mean to harp on Ebron, but I mean, did you guys see what he put on Twitter, or he was on his podcast or whatever? And he was talking about Super Bowl and he was upset about playing 3 games in 12 days. I like Ebron and everything, but I think he needs to, focus more on just getting the job done on the field and not thinking about the Super Bowl, which is still, way far ahead down the road for the Steelers.
Luke, what did you call Jimmy Graham again?
Jimmy Grandpa.
Oh, man.
He's an old man for an NFL tight end, dude. I mean, he's bounced around a little bit. He's actually been very good this year, though. I mean, I thought he was washed when he signed. I mean, that contract is pretty expensive. I don't remember exactly what it was, but Ebron's contract is definitely fantastic compared to his. That's all I know.
Subtle savagery is appreciated and supported on the Renegade Blitz podcast. You're invited back. But to get back onto the tight ends, I like confidence. I like the fact that he's been wanting to be a Steeler really since the Juju bike game, as Chris Carter told us on one of our previous podcasts. And he wants to be a Steeler. If you want to be a Steeler, you also got to catch the balls that are easier. He can make these big catches. All fine. Even that one that was meaningless at the end, really, he went up and got it, and you're just like, man, if you can eliminate some of those drops, you're automatically, by default, one of the best tight ends in Steelers history. It's really only Eric Green and Heath Miller.
Just one more note on Ebron is I don't think we might be using him the right way. He's more of a red zone threat. I mean, look at his days in Indianapolis. I mean, he had 16 touchdowns in a season one time. I mean, maybe we should get him some more 10-zone targets. You know what I'm saying? Throwing the ball down low, match him up on the outside with a corner, and throw him a fade every once in a while. I don't think we're really giving him those opportunities.
I think we're not exactly what you're saying. We haven't used him the right way. Don't use him as a blocking tight end because that's not what he is.
I think the entry to Zach Gentry might have caused that.
Yeah, definitely. I was about to say, Gentry is being out with the knee injury and just not having other tight ends really on the roster. Is it Zach Rader, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
I think is his backup. I don't think we have that reliable blocking tight end other than Vance McDonald, and you need somebody for the other side. And I just don't think that's his bread and butter. And, and unfortunately, this is what happens with a lot of, Steelers free agents, anybody who's not homegrown. Once they get signed here, you got to be on your A game because Steelers Nation will quickly turn on you. And I'm going to go with, terms of, 2020 or whatever, cancel you basically.
Mm-hmm.
Very unfortunate, but it's they could so quickly turn on you just based off making these mistakes. We've seen it with Moncrief, even if just anybody, if you have those drops, you'll easily get turned on.
We went from feed Moncrief to leave Moncrief. Mm-hmm. That's how it went in this town. It's just that
exactly.
That's how it can be around here. And it's I think Eric Ebron is a way better catching threat than Moncrief ever was.
Very much so.
For the Steelers. Yes. He's done 100%. He's done a lot more, and we've seen the hurdle over the Dallas defender to score a touchdown that really meant a lot for the Steelers. I think it might have been the game winner.
Or just catching laterals from Ben. He does that so well. It's when Ben's about to get tackled, just those laterals to Ebron, those are so beautiful. We've seen them in a couple games, but then it's just like you guys keep saying, he misses those easy throws.
Well, let's talk about the passing game. We've kind of gone a little bit over with the tight ends here, but we want to talk about the entire thing here. Ben Roethlisberger, 33 for 53, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that costly interception that basically iced the game. The most telling offensive stat of the night for him was 5.8 yards a pass. That's how much he averaged for each completion. He should also have 7 more completions on his record. Here's a stat that's going to just drive you insane. In a tweet from Jenna Lane of ESPN, the Steelers dropped the ball 7 times. Again, the most over the last 15 seasons. And Chris, You're exempt from this question because you already know the answer, but I want you guys to name the last 4 times the Steelers have had at least 5 drops in that span.
My guess is every game they had Dante Moncrief on their roster.
Man, I honestly have no idea.
Well,
I also have no clue.
Well,
Was it before Ben? That's just
no. It's actually, they've all been coincidentally in the Tomlin era. I don't know if that's supposed to be an indictment on his receiving, but Chris answered this question last week with me. It was the 2007 again. It was in 2007 against the Browns, 2019 against the Rams. Of course, Moncrief was long gone by that point, Luke.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately, I think he was done after the Seattle game, but where was I? 2019 with the Rams. Of course, last week with the Ravens, and now this. They now lead the league in drops with 31. 10 more than the second place team. What's your thoughts on this epidemic of drops and a pandemic for the Steelers? Is this just too many passes, or is it issues with the wide receivers and tight ends and maybe running backs?
It's really hard to put a piece on. I don't think it's too many passes. I just think maybe the types of passes at times. It's like sometimes Ben does have a little bit of a touch in those balls, although it should be a catch. It's just sometimes it's like you have Deontay running and then he's about to get hit or something. He's putting his hands up to catch the ball. I just think sometimes it's just he's not in the best position to make the catches sometimes. But there's definitely some times where it's like they shouldn't be drops, but it's just hard to put a picture on it. I definitely think, though, it does come down to the receivers. Maybe they just got to hit the jugs some more. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't do it any better, but, sometimes it's just they have to make those catches.
Luke?
Yeah, I totally agree with him, but I think it's actually become more of a mental thing. Drops, people get the drops, literally. It's a thing. Deontay apparently has struggled with it all season. That's actually pretty easy to tell, but drops are drops, I agree with you. I think sometimes the ball placement's a little tough. Those balls will be dropped. Any wide receiver in the NFL will drop some of those balls, but there's wide open passes that are getting dropped here. I don't know what's happening, but I do expect to see some more reps from James Washington. I don't know if you guys saw the quotes, but he said something about if these wide receivers aren't catching the ball, I'll bring in guys who will. Then I think James Washington will get some more reps because of stuff like this. James Washington's probably the most sure-handed receiver on the team besides maybe Claypool. But yeah, I'm just expecting some more reps for Washington.
One question. Who leads the Steelers in drop percentage?
Ooh, drop percentage. Is it Washington? Tell me it's Washington. That'd be hilarious.
Yes, it actually is Washington just by
That's
not
funny.
Getting throws. He actually leads the team with 7.1% passes.
That's hilarious. That's actually really funny because, I feel like without knowing that, I feel like he is their strong-handed guy. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's weird.
When it comes down to Deontay, Ebron, even Juju and Claypool, it's volume. They get the volume of the passes, and Washington is kind of like sometimes, if they want to use Ray McCloud, a fifth option for the Steelers, which is insane. In the same ways that you just mentioned. He doesn't feel like a guy that has the drops. I know that early on in his rookie season that he had those little bit of issues. He was intimidated by Ben a little bit. And maybe that caused a little bit of a dip in his play. But yeah, even whenever I seen that stat, I just glanced at it on Twitter. I was like, wow. That's
actually really
insane.
Interesting. Like you mentioned, his first year, he had some confidence issues, but I feel like he's really grown into his own. I think James Washington's a tad underrated, honestly. I think he's a pretty good wide receiver these days.
He's going to get something on the open market. Eventually, he's going to want to go test his skills unless the Steelers come through with wanting to make him more available for pass catching opportunities.
I agree with what you guys said. It's really a mental thing, and they just got to get back to the fundamentals. And, like Guthrie said, hopefully they hit the jugs machine this week and get all those reps in and everything.
If you're wondering, the receptions targets, Deontay Johnson led with 12 targets, 8 receptions. Eric Ebron, 11 targets, 7 receptions. Juju Smith-Schuster, 10 targets, 7 receptions. Jalen Samuels, a very nice little run he had on one of those plays. It was his longest gain of the day, 8 yards. 4 targets, 3 catches. James Washington, 4 targets, 2 catches, 80 yards, including that 50-yard touchdown. It's ironic. The Steelers are better suited to score from midfield then the 1, which is ridiculous. Chase Claypool, 2 receptions on 4 targets. Benny Snell, 2 receptions on 3 targets. Ray McCloud, 2 receptions on 3 targets. And a target each for Hawkins and McFarland.
Hawkins, oh my God.
He's the wrong eligible receiver. It's automatically Banner. There should have been a tight end picked up off the waiver wire somewhere. It's Banner's play. Come on, Randy.
That's so sad.
Luke, you have the fantasy impact for the Steelers, and I want to get your take on this because this actually happened last week during the Ravens game. I noticed a tweet from one CBS fantasy football writer, Chris Towers. I don't know if you heard his name.
I feel like I've heard of him before.
You've probably seen his articles. You just never seen the byline. He tried to bring up the argument that he felt that Deontay Johnson was a good fantasy wide receiver, but not exactly a good real-time football wide receiver. I want your take on that.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit pre-show, I remember, but Deontay Johnson, I think he's a very talented NFL wide receiver. If you're familiar at all with Matt Harmon's reception perception that he puts out yearly, it's through the Fantasy Footballers. I don't know if he publishes it to the public actually, but I pay for it because it's really, really informative. He looks at route trees and he looks at the percent successful rate on certain routes, the amount of routes run, and stuff like that. And Deontay Johnson is at like the 90th percentile or a little bit higher maybe on route success and routes ran and his route tree. And I think he has immense talent. I mean, he's very good with the ball in his hands. He's an excellent rack wide receiver because he has the punt return background. I think he's an extremely talented wide receiver. And come a few years from now, I think he might be like a top 10 X receiver in the NFL. I mean, he's extremely talented. I feel like if he's developed to his full potential, he's a Pro Bowler. It's the drops. It's the silly mistakes and the fumbles every once in a while. But, I mean, the big play potential is there. The consistent route running is there. I think he's a reliable wide receiver 1. I just think he needs to get those hands dirty. And once he does, I think the ceiling is the roof.
Guys, you have anything to add to that?
I just agree. It's just he's a crazy good player, although it has hurt him this year having a couple injuries. That's maybe that's part of the mental thing with him. He was plagued with it early in the year, but other than the drops, he really hasn't missed a beat from last year. I mean, we just want to see a little bit more, from him, especially with his first year with Big Ben at the helm. And hopefully that continues to build. If we have, let's say Ben returns next year, let's hope that, that their relationship continues to build, especially with free agency. We could lose Juju, then it's just like their relationship needs to go next level.
Chris, to finish up.
Yeah, I agree. He's an amazing route runner. He's very shifty, and the way he runs his routes, it's not like Antonio Brown level, but some people compare him sometimes like Antonio Brown, obviously not up to the par of what Antonio Brown was, because Antonio Brown rarely had any drops ever, really, when you really think about it. Every receiver has a drop here and there, but 2 receivers, Hines Ward and Antonio Brown, were always reliable pass catchers.
And we're about to move on. We're in that little middle stage between offense and defense. That means it's time to talk special teams. And it was another rough night for Ray McCloud, not just having his name wrong, being called Ray McDonald.
Oh my gosh.
He nearly muffed another punt. And when everything was working fine for him, he just couldn't find a way to get himself loose for a game-changing return. Also in special teams news, Lancaster, PA native Matthew Wright hit his lone field goal and 2 extra points to keep the Steelers competitive in this game. So what's your thoughts on McLeod's day and also the rest of the special teams? And we'll start with Guthrie.
Yeah, just Ray McLeod's come down to earth moment, unfortunately. We were talking so highly of him, me and you, Ty, we were waiting for that play. I'm still convinced that it'll happen. I know you are too, I'm sure. But it's definitely just, we needed a little bit of humbling, and that definitely is what happened. Overall, I really do like him. I think he's that punt return guy we've been looking for, at least, for this year. But he has some work to do to clean it up a little bit. Other than that, not great, not terrible kind of situation.
I want to get you guys' thoughts on Matthew Wright. And one of the big reasons why McFarland had that wheel route is because Mike Tomlin probably didn't exactly give Wright the trust to hit that field goal into the wind in Heinz Field. So I'm curious if you guys think if that was the right decision, and we'll start with Chris.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with the decision. You had 2 plays needing 1 yard. I mean, you have to get that. Like Tomlin said during his press conference, you don't deserve to win really when you can't get a yard in crucial moments like that. I mean, it was a 45-yard kick, and I'm not really sure how strong Wright's leg is, but you think if he's an NFL kicker, you think he would at least be able to make that, but I really don't know. And Tomlin knows best as far as that, so I'm not going to really question him on that. How was the weather in Pittsburgh? It was pretty windy.
It was a solid night.
Yeah.
All things considered. I think if it was on the closed end, he probably would have gave it a shot. The Heinz Field open end of that horseshoe is notorious for having wind swirling, and trust me, Chris, from the many times me and you both went to Point Park downtown, when that wind swirls, it swirls and it's not fun.
Yes, especially off the river there where Heinz Field is. It's tough to make kicks there, and I don't have a problem with Tomlin's decision. I mean, you got to get that 1 yard.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Yeah, I completely agree. You have to get that 1 yard.
I actually disagree. I think he should have taken the points there. I think if you're an NFL kicker, you should attempt a 45-yard field goal to go up by 3 with limited time. I think the decision to go for it on 4th down there was much more questionable than the 4th and inches on the goal line earlier to start the game. I actually was a fan of that call. My dad was not. He was very unhappy. I like being aggressive to try to start off the game hot and get a touchdown instead of a field goal. Obviously, it leaves points on the board, but worst case scenario, you have the greatest punt of all time on the half-yard line. But in that situation there, it's a very makeable kick. I know Heinz Field is notorious for wind. If it was 50 yards, I probably would have gone for it, but 45 is very makeable for an NFL caliber kicker. Kicked perfect for the rest of the night. So, I mean, I feel like if he took the shot, it probably had like a 75% chance of going in at least. That's not the greatest odds, but I think I probably would have played it safe and taken the points. Like you brought up, Ty, I don't know how strong his leg is. I never looked at his stats or anything, but I feel like if you're an NFL caliber kicker, you should be able to make a 45-yarder. That's just my opinion.
That's a fair statement. I can't really deny with that logic. It's, again, I don't know the situation on the win. It might have been a win thing. It might have been just Tomlin not going down there. I don't know, because Homestead wins off the Mon is very different from the Three Rivers Junction that Heinz Field is located on. So who knows? Tomlin's never going to tell us, so we should just quit asking.
Nick Saban referencing.
Just quit asking.
Let's move on to the defense. And before we talk about the entire defensive effort by the Steelers, which is mixed with good, mixed with bad, I want to know what you guys thought about Alex Smith's business decision to hide the ball, potentially getting and receiving a field goal that was very crucial towards the outcome of this game. It was an administrative error as announced by officials in Heinz Field. And I honestly said this. At first, I was confused. Then I was just like, that's gamesmanship. And especially after last week with the Steelers, you just have to tip your cap and move on. But I can understand if you guys feel differently about this, because in the end, it cost them, really. It killed them. So we'll start off. Let's go with Guthrie, because me and you were talking about it on Twitter.
I would be normally, if this came down to it and that won in the game, we'd be having a completely different conversation. But did he realize what he was doing? I really don't know. I don't know if he's that clever. I mean, I think that's what we were saying. It's like, I'm not sure. This might be something we see, the NFL talk about, in the league meetings come the summer. And, there's always a situation that happens in the Steelers game, something like that happens, and they might have to have a conversation about it. I'm not sure. If I'm the NFL, you definitely you can't stop the clock in that situation. You really can't. And if the Steelers are slowing them down, you got to throw a flag. That's when you draw the line. But that was just a mistake, on the NFL's part, adding more time. That was kind of, especially 8 seconds. That was just too much.
I think Smith knew what he was doing. I think it was a savvy veteran move. And if you rewatch the game, it looked like he was smiling while he was going off the field. And it was a tough situation there. They had 8 seconds, and Ron Rivera said they were prepared to do a rush kick anyway. I don't pinpoint it as it was a big impact. It did have an impact on the game, but it wasn't the sole reason why the Steelers lost. They had a lot of miscues and everything. Yeah. But I think it was just veteran move by Smith.
That's a good point, because why else would he be running off the field with the ball?
Yeah.
He'd be giving it to the ref, like you're saying. That's a good point.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you, Chris. I think it was just complete gamesmanship at its finest. Alex Smith is known to be one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. That's why everyone loved him so much, grooming Patrick Mahomes to be the successor in the Chiefs. I mean, I think he's a very, very smart quarterback. He's a very heady guy, and I just think that it was a really smart move. I mean, what's his name? Dean Blandino, whatever that ref's name who comes onto the screen and talks is. I mean, he said normally they have the kicker ball that they go and grab or whatever, but in this situation, you just keep the game ball in the field and use it. So Smith knew what he was doing. Like Chris said and Guthrie just talked about, you don't just grab the ball and run off the field. You know what he's doing. So, like, I definitely just think that he saw an opportunity and he took it, and it worked. My dad was so pissed, though. The entire game, he kept saying that they won with an illegal field goal. Oh, man, that was fun.
I'll admit, at first, it kind of had me feeling like Denzel Washington from Training Day. You know what scene I'm talking about. The NFL is going to fix that rule. They got to fix that rule, because that's one of those, okay, you're a little sneaky one here. Let's make sure that never happens again, because if not, because that can be led into something that costs teams Super Bowl trips, maybe even Super Bowls, and lots of other things that nobody's really going to be happy about in the end. Now it's time to talk about the defense, and when you look at it in a vacuum, the Steelers did their jobs defensively. Chris, again, we were talking about it with Bram. The guys to shut down for Washington was McLaurin and Gibson. And, of course, Gibson's out with an injury. And Luke is very sad and downtrodden in his face about that.
It was so sad.
So sad. McLaurin was kind of weird because, Chris, me and you kind of penciled him for 100 yards. There's just certain wide receivers that the Steelers just, and maybe most teams in the league, with his stats, just didn't have an answer for, but surprisingly, the Steelers had an answer. He was targeted 6 times, catching the ball twice for 14 yards. The problem is, the other options for the Washington football team cost the Steelers. McKissick and Thomas had 19 targets between the two of them, and they had 19 receptions. 10 for McKissick for 70 yards, and just a crushing reminder of the days of tight ends like Rob Gronkowski running wild on the Steelers. Thomas had 98 yards for a touchdown. But also there was a catch by Sims that was very huge towards really changing the fortunes of the game for the Steelers. What's your thoughts on this game? They shut down the guys they wanted to shut down, but in the end, they were thwarted. We'll start with Luke.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a few notes. I think the reason the Steelers lost this game was on defense. As well as it performed, I think it was injuries. First of all, I mean, Devin Bush has been gone for games now, but we also lost Robert Spillane. And after Spillane went out, all of a sudden, McKissick started feasting on those underneath out routes to the right. It was open time and time and time again. And when you have a guy who can guard the running back out of the backfield, a quick guy like Bush or even Spillane has been a fantastic fill-in. That goes away. It did not go away, to say the least. And then the missing piece of Steven Nelson to complement Joe Hayden was a big factor last game, I think. Freed up the other guys, as you said. I mean, Terry McLaurin was locked down by Hayden for most of the game and Cam Sutton. But when Justin Lane had to come in to fill in for the other guys, and it really started to open up for them. I mean, missed tackle after missed tackle, opportunity after opportunity. And then you have Avery Williamson, who hasn't played that much, guarding the running back out of the backfield. And then all of a sudden, they have a rhythm. Both guys might not be open every play, but either McKissick or Sims or even McLaurin would be open at times because you have to rely on all these depth pieces to guard their number 2 wide receiver, their number 1 wide receiver, and their number 2 running back. But he's an elite receiving running back. I mean, McKissick has been fantastic this year for receiving. I mean, as a fantasy guy, I mean, J.D. McKissick has been one of the most underrated players in the NFL for fantasy purposes, just because of his receiving abilities. I mean, it's been tough.
Washington been looking for a number 2 receiver all year, really, and Cam Sims really stepped up for them. He had 3 receptions for 29 yards or more. Overall in the game, Alex Smith had 4 completions of 29 yards or more, so they got explosive plays against the Steelers, and I was really impressed with Logan Thomas. He had a really good game at tight end for Washington. You know, they came through when they needed to make plays. That 3rd and 14 play on their first drive coming out of the half when they're down 14-3 from their own 14-yard line, you know, quick screen to Cam Sims, and he turned it into explosive play and got that first down. It just hats off to Washington. Their skill players stepped up, and you're right about McKissick. He's really underrated. I really didn't know too much about him really prior to our interview with Bram, and a lot of things that Bram said were really true about how Washington's a second half team. And I tweeted this out at the beginning of the second half. Remember him telling us that, and they outscored the Steelers 20-3 in the second half, and they had 1,300 unanswered points in the fourth quarter.
That's why you should listen to the Renegade Blitz, because what people tell us is most likely what happened. And Bram told us, and that's what happened. Of course, as we've been mentioning the most, really the rushing attack for the Washington football team was shut down. 21 carries, 45 yards. Yes, Peyton Barber did have a touchdown on his 14 carries for 23 yards, but there was still the classic Steelers run defense. Is there anything that the team could really change aside from, maybe not getting penalties on the goal line?
Well, I just think that we need to start clogging up the tight end a little bit more, being more physical with the tight end, the line of scrimmage with whoever's guarding them, and take away those easy dump-offs. I mean, I think the easy dump-offs have been a problem for the Steelers for years now. I mean, it's always open, but we also need to stop with the busted coverages. I understand that Justin Lane subbed in late in the game, and he didn't get to practice a lot, and same with Williamson probably. That one drive where they had 3 big plays in a row and went down and scored, that was horrendous. They really need to work on busted coverage and need to communicate more. That's another underrated injury that happened in this game. Spillane had the green dot, and he got injured. So Vince Williams is basically the third string play caller for the defense, and he's coming in. So some communication issues there need to be ironed out in practice, and just some busted coverages.
Yeah, it's just what you're saying. It's just these busted coverages where sometimes we even see a player like T.J. Watt on a wide receiver, or a running back. It's just, it shouldn't happen, but sometimes that's just all they have in those situations. And I don't exactly know who that lies on, obviously somewhere in the defensive staff, but it's just, some of those things just can't happen, especially when you're on an NFL level, playing NFL level talent.
Here's the question for you guys. Who was the bigger loss for the Steelers last night? Was it Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson, or Robert Spillane?
Spillane for me.
Spillane and Hayden are a toss-up for me, but I'm going to go Spillane just because McLaurin didn't make too much noise regardless.
Yeah, I personally, what I thought is I thought that ankle injury might have still been bothering him a little bit. I just feel like that wasn't the player that I've been watching all year. His performance against the Steelers, I feel like he's better than that. But I think what the Washington did was a good thing. They had him out there no matter what, and they exploited the other parts of the defense that were open, because he had the attention.
Chris, who would you think was the bigger impact to the Steelers' defense in terms of injuries?
Probably Spillane. I think, like what Luke mentioned, the communication and missing him there, and what Vince Williams having to call the plays. And I believe on that final touchdown there for Washington by Thomas, that I think they're a bunch set, and I don't know really whose guy was that supposed to be, Vince Williams, or no one got out there. It
was Vince Williams. You saw it on the replay. He was nowhere near him. It was bad.
Yeah, those busted covers, they got to clean that up. And the play that got Washington in the field goal range there at the end to take the lead 20-17. That big pass to Sims, it was pretty decent coverage by Cam Sutton. He just kind of made a one-handed grab. Like you said, he stepped up. And I actually asked a friend today who's a Washington fan. I was like, where did he come from, Cam Sims? And he said he was undrafted. And then I looked it up. He came out of Alabama, undrafted in 2018. So I mean, he just came up and had a big game.
Built by Bama. We should have figured.
Yeah.
If you're undrafted and you went to Alabama, you probably should have been drafted by someone. Someone messed up in the scouting department somewhere.
It was a huge catch. I mean, like Chris said, that was fantastic coverage. I mean, he was a step shy, and he was trying to make a play on the ball instead of maybe trying to focus on the receiver a bit more. But, you can't really complain about a 50-yard bomb that was a one-handed grab. It is what it is. You live and you die.
Yeah, quite simply, it was a great catch and something they really need in that moment. And, this props to him. He made the most of his opportunity.
The front seven has been the most consistent part of the Steelers game all year, and they did it again, getting to Alex Smith, 3 sacks and 10 quarterback hits. T.J. Watt had 2 sacks and 4 quarterback hits himself. Spillane had a sack and 2 hits. Tuitt also had a sack and a hit. Hayward had 2 hits, and Marcus Allen registered a hit as well. Watt also got his elusive first forced fumble of the season. And Chris, you mentioned that a little bit before the preview, so guess what? We at least got one thing right. And even with the loss, he really made his presence felt towards Defensive Player of the Year award, as his brother JJ really put out the case for him. First in a lot of categories, including pass rush win rates. What are your thoughts on the most consistent part of the Steelers' defense this year? And we'll start with Chris.
They did pretty good, 3 sacks and everything. On that touchdown to Thomas, Watt actually beat Morgan Moses on that play, like really bad. And he was coming off the edge, and he hit Smith on that play. And Smith just got it off in time and pleaded that for the touchdown. And then how about that one play? That was really close to a fumble when he almost forced 2 in that game on Alex Smith. He just got his arm moving forward. Live, I thought that was a fumble, but I thought Watt played out of his mind. It was like extremely impressive performance. He continues to make a case for himself for Defensive Player of the Year, and I thought he had a great game. And man, he was so close to recovering that fumble. Logan Thomas there for Washington just came in and recovered that ball. That would have been a huge play for the Steelers if they could have forced that turnover. And it was the second time this year that they didn't force a turnover in the game. I think last time they did it was against Tennessee in Week 7.
Yeah, we definitely need that defense to get a turnover. That might have helped us a little bit with our offensive woes. But, Watt just as a whole, he's just, he's just getting better and better every year. I remember back when we drafted him, I was kind of surprised that we picked him. I was hoping we would, but I just didn't think we were going to go that direction. Definitely taking the front runner of that Defensive Player of the Year race. Still could change. Still a couple weeks of football left, but hey, he's looking good. We're definitely happy to have him.
Few questions were answered about the Steelers front seven last night. I mean, there was a lot of questions about without Bud Dupree on the other side, with TJ Watt getting some more double team blocks. Well, Tua was back, which was nice, but there was a mild concern that Watt wouldn't have been as productive without Dupree on the other side, and he's still 8, as we all saw. I think that Watt should have just dove on that ball, man. It was so frustrating that he didn't recover that. I maybe want to rip my hair out when he didn't recover that fumble. It sucks, but it is what it is. But props to Alex Smith for dealing with pressure in his face all night and not having a single interception. He had heat on him consistently, and he was still throwing really nice balls. I mean, it was nice to see Alex Smith have a good game. Sadly, it was against the Steelers. Yeah. But the front seven looked great last night again.
Yeah, that's the thing with Smith. He's always been known to be real smart with his throws and really conservative with his passes. And, he doesn't throw many interceptions. There was a couple, I think, there where the Steelers could have picked him off. But, overall, it wasn't like they were playing RG3 the week prior.
Not at all. And if there's one thing, Alex Smith, this is a man that had to deal with 5 different offensive coordinators in his first 5 years up in San Francisco. So especially with the leg injury and all that stuff, I think he firmly planted his flag for Comeback Player of the Year. Really, you can't be mad if it's him. If it's not going to be Ben, it might as well be Alex Smith. And winding down a little bit here, to finish up, what is one aspect of this game and really the entire season now that we've suffered the first loss in Steelers football in 2020? What's one thing that you want to see better from the Steelers? And we'll start with Luke.
Running game. I mean, I feel like we were all kind of thinking it, but the running game has to improve if this team wants to win a Super Bowl. You cannot go into the playoffs where weaknesses are exposed and not have a running game. Ben cannot throw the ball 50 times in the wild card game or the divisional round if we get a bye and win. You can't do it. I don't care who the opponent is. If they're good enough to make the playoffs in the AFC this year, which has been a pretty loaded conference, you're going to need to be all over the place in both aspects of the passing game and the running game. You're going to need to establish yourself on the ground and through the air. And if we're not doing that, we're going to be sitting home very early.
I think there's a lot of things right now the Steelers need clean up. They haven't been playing well in the last couple weeks, really. One, like Luke mentioned, they got to get that run game going. They're not going to go very far in the playoffs if they're so one-dimensional with Roethlisberger throwing like over 50 passes a game. They'll be one and done in the playoffs. The receivers got to start catching the ball better. What's happened in the last 2 weeks with like my estimated unofficial count of 16 drops by the receivers is just unbelievable. I didn't expect that to happen to them. And then the final thing is the defense. They got to limit the explosive plays. They're pretty vulnerable, I think, this year and giving up big pass plays. And if they meet Mahomes in the playoffs with Kelsey and Tyreek Hill there, I think Mahomes would have a field day if they don't start cleaning their issues up. But there's a lot of things they have to clean up, I think, just to get to that point.
I'm gonna go with red zone offense. This making smarter play calling, score early, score often. Our defense is doing well enough where they're holding opponents usually under 20 points minus, a couple weeks. But this is an offense with the talent and the quarterback that should be able to put at least 30 points a game. To be that low, this game was unacceptable. And there were definitely some touchdowns that were left down on the field, as you guys saw quite obviously.
Identity. It's time for the Steelers to rediscover an identity here. A lot of people think, well, it's kind of crazy to look to establish an identity in Week 13. I've always felt that it's never too late to create winning habits, and it's going to start this week, and it has to start with that running game. It has to start with the trenches. It has to start with trying to create more big play opportunities. It starts really from the offensive line out. Defensively, you just got to make sure that if someone goes down, you communicate, because that's really the big factor in this loss. Spillane going out, it's communication. Bush was the green dot, then Spillane was the green dot. You got to figure out who else is going to have that green dot just in case, and find out who is the guy that can get this defense set and ready to defend against these tight ends, because it seems like it's going to be rearing its ugly head once again. I'm still afraid of the multiple rusher theory that I have had early in the season. That's all for us, Luke. Again, thank you for coming on the show. We hope to have you on more. Did you enjoy yourself today?
I loved it, man. I love talking Steelers with these guys. I mean, I've done a couple fantasy football podcasts before, but this is a blast. I mean, I love going deep and diving into every aspect of the Steelers with you guys. I would love to come on again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and anytime. And that's all for us here. For Chris Ward, Guthrie Rasmussen, and Luke Sawhook, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in. The next podcast, a preview podcast with the Buffalo Bills. We'll be talking to Greg Tomsett, host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Stay tuned for more. This is the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.